If you're in sales and you're trying to close more deals, there's a lot of people online that are telling you, use a new script, use this new strategy, this new little objection handle or a loop, whatever it may be. But you got to understand that the fundamental 80% of your results is always going to come down to understanding the psychology of sales and your own psychology. And in this video, I'm going to take you through the deeper layer of a sales conversation and a communication conversation in general, okay? Because the deeper layer is always going to start with the first thing, which is frame, okay? If you understand frame, then you're going to know that the frame that you set and that you're able to enforce in a context, in a communication, right, setting, or in a sales setting is going to be determining what everything means within that frame. So I like to explain frame as the following thing. Let's say that you have a very nice fucking painting, and this painting you can put in a nice museum, right, around a nice frame, and it's going to seem like a very expensive painting, right? Or you could put it up in a random house, in a random living room, whatever, without any frame, without any prior context, and that same exact painting can be deemed worthless. Can you close this window, babe? It's that one. Gracias. And so the only thing that changed is the frame and the context in which that thing is seen. So frame essentially gives whatever is inside it a certain meaning, okay? And within your day-to-day communication, you're gonna have frames in everything that you do. So for example, you can give someone a compliment, right? And that compliment can be received as you being try hard, you compensating, depending on the context, or that compliment can be received as like, oh, this person is actually coming from their own full cup, but they're literally just giving me a compliment because they feel so good about themselves already, right? And that frame completely is going to dictate what that compliment means. Either it's a compensating thing, it's a supplicating thing to the other person and it's low value, or it can be high value. Now, even within this compliment thing, in many sales conversations, there's many people that give a bunch of compliments that try to build a lot of rapport in sales, right? In frame. But what you got to understand is that most of the time when you try to build rapport, this is also a common misconception in sales. When you try to build a lot of rapport with a person, you're essentially putting yourself below them, right? Because if you've ever gone to like a networking setting, and I always expand these sales concepts over communication in general to make it more understandable, which is if you're going to some networking meeting, whatever, and you're meeting someone, and you're going up and you're asking them a lot of questions. This is like what that book says, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Which there's some good stuff in there, but it just completely skips over these really important dynamics. Essentially, this tells you to go up and be nice, right? Make the other person feel good, ask a lot of questions, this, that. But if you do that, right, especially if you're trying to network with someone who's already above you externally, whatever that may mean, then you're just going to come off as low value most of the time, right? And this person is not going to want to network with you because you're basically just very forthcoming. You're trying for rapport, right? You're trying to get into rapport with this person. And so if this is the case, then you automatically put yourself below them because you're trying for rapport. Just like in sales, if you're trying to get a lot of rapport with this person, you're opening up, you're talking about the soccer game, you're talking about this, you're telling them, oh, I was already also living there, right? If they say they live somewhere, whatever. All of these little things show that you want to create rapport with this person, which does sub-communicate. It doesn't have to be the end all be all, but it does sub-communicate that you are actually, right, thinking that you're lower value than them or that you need or want something from them, okay? Either one of those two. And so frame is basically the centered around thing within that sales conversation between you and that person, okay? So the frame can be, okay, I'm the person that's got the wisdom here, and I'm the person that's going to analyze your problem, and I'm the person that has the authority in this conversation. Or it can be the other way around, right? The customer can be like, listen, I know what I'm talking about. I've looked around and I'm just here to ask some questions, get some information, and from there make an informed choice. And now they have that side of the frame, right? And so frame control is about knowing, first of all, what frame is best utilized for that conversation. And then, basically enforcing that frame through the right questioning, through the right certainty, and through cutting it off if it doesn't go into that frame. So if the prospect starts ranting on about different stuff or starts asking you a bunch of questions, be like, hey, listen, we'll get to that. Actually, I'm going to walk you through that and explain it exactly in a minute here. But let me ask you, just so I know how to tie that into your personal situation, what is actually your goal with this besides the money, right? Where do you want to get to? And is time freedom very important to you, or you don't mind working 12-hour days, whatever it may be, right? So kind of gradually go into that. And then from there on, if you're able to maintain that frame, anything that you say is going to be way more powerful. Because think of it like this. You are going to a doctor's office and the doctor's prescribing you things, asking you questions and giving you medications. You're probably going to trust it. You're probably going to take it with some weight, right? Versus just a friend, or if this doctor is super beta and this doctor is just asking you, oh, but what do you think you feel? What do you think this? What do you think that? Look, you're probably not going to trust the doctor. You're probably not even going to take the medication, aka buy the product, right? So you have to always, you cannot in a sales conversation be the beta, quote unquote, within that context. You always have to be the alpha. You always have, and when I say alpha, I don't mean this macho bullshit, right? Because that's actually beta trying to compensate. What I mean is just being the more certain person, knowing what you're there for, and being the more knowledgeable and more, person with more weight behind their words within that context. You have to be the leader within that context, and not from a bullying perspective necessarily, but from a perspective of, hey, listen, I got to lead this person to the right decision. I got to lead this person into making the decisions from their future self, right? From the identity and the personality and the reality that they want to be in, rather than their current self, and coach them through that. And that's why I always say, even in selling other shit than coaching, even if you're not selling coaching, most of my sales conversations, they look like coaching calls. They're literally me going deep with this person and asking them questions they've never asked themselves before, and getting them to reflect on what decisions would be that would get them to another level of life. Okay, and that's another thing. If you're able to, a lot of people talk about objection handling. This is not the topic of this video, but I'll touch on it because it's going to be valuable for you. A lot of people talk about, oh, this objection handle, at the end of the day, if you're able to get the prospect to a place where they're thinking from the identity that they would have if they would have their goal, right? If they would be the person that would, make this money, or that would be, this confident, or whatever it may be, right? That would have these social abundance, whatever it may be. If they're thinking and deciding from that person, they're usually going to do it, right? Because that person needs the help, that person needs the guidance, that person would take a growth action over a comfort action, okay? A growth choice over a comfort choice. Growth choices move you upwards, but our brain always resists growth choices because they're unsafe, because they're unfamiliar, and your evolutionary mind just wants to stay safe. And what is safe is what is familiar, even if it deems to be very unpleasurable, okay? Even if the other side, the unfamiliar, is very maybe potentially pleasurable, you still won't want it, just because you're like, your subconscious at least is like, this is unfamiliar, I could die, okay? That's all evolutionary psychology. Anyway, and so even if you're selling something else, right? Like, for example, life insurance or whatever it may be that doesn't have to do with necessarily them getting to a new goal in life, you can still associate that on an identity level, because your identity is the strongest force in the human personality. So if you can line up their identity through kind of this coaching sales mythology that I'm talking about here, then you're going to be able to actually get them to a place where they're going to make a decision effortlessly, because they're already that person, right? So if you're selling this life insurance thing, then, maybe a question like, okay, so, that person that, would actually protect their family and make sure that they're taken care of, like, what kind of a decision would that person make here, right? Those kinds of things, working on an identity level. Now, you can also label people as a certain identity, right? You can say certain things that make them identify with that, if you do it very subtly, because a lot of people do that way too obvious and it just comes across manipulative and salesy, and you don't want to do that. But with that said, that leads me into the second point, which is certainty. And certainty is actually the most important quality in you and in your sales call, or in your sales meeting, whatever it may be. Because if you don't have the certainty, and certainty can be replaced for confidence too, then you have nothing, right? I would put a person with 100% certainty and confidence that this is the best thing that person could ever buy, over the best salesperson in the world that really thinks it's a load of shit, because it's going to sub-communicate, and that's the emotion that you essentially want to transfer. What is a sales conversation, you guys? It is essentially a transfer of certainty from one person to another person. Now, obviously, it's not just certainty, but that's the main thing. It's a certainty that they're going to be able to do this. It's certainty that this is the right thing for them, etc. Now, what are the other things, right? Obviously, you want to create urgency. Obviously, you want to create motivation in the prospect, right? Those kinds of things. Or you want to It's not even creating, it's just getting it. It's already inside them. Everything is already inside you, me, and the prospect. Everything, every quality you need to be hyper successful, but it just needs to be brought out. And sometimes through these sales conversations and through simple questions and also having genuine concern and interest in a person, you can do that and they can make a buying decision. And then it's not just about sales anymore, but it's literally about transforming someone's life. Because that one decision, even if the program ended up not being great for them, sometimes that one decision of just taking action and just actually doing the thing and stepping into discomfort can be the best thing ever for someone. Now, with that certainty thing, you got to understand that when two people meet in whatever context it is, mostly in communication, but even in a boxing ring, always the person who has the strongest reality wins. Now, what does that mean? Who has the most certainty in their reality? Okay, so we just, as point one, we talked about frame, right? Now, point two is about certainty. Now, certainty makes the frame work, right? Frame is the thing, the frame, the context that you want to create, the meaning that you want to create and have that's workable for the result that you want. But certainty is what is the catalyst for that. It allows for it. It's the prerequisite for it. Because if you have this frame of like, oh yeah, I'm the leader here, I'm going to handle business here, this and that, but you don't have certainty in that, and the prospect has the same frame, then it collides and the prospect has more certainty, it washes over your frame, and now they're going to be the leader in the conversation. It's honestly quite logical, but most people don't think about this. So you want to train your certainty and train your confidence by essentially getting reps in, right? And the most easy way, the most surefire way to do this is to build your way up, right? Go with easier calls to harder calls and build your way up to a level where, okay, now I have built my certainty up to a level where, okay, I can take on an A-type prospect, or I can take on a harder sell, right? And so this works the exact same way as it does as an analogy in boxing, right? In boxing, people will be matched up, right? I was just in a boxing event in Colombia. There were some guys that were, fighting some absolute scrubs out here. The Americans came down to fight some scrubs, to be honest with you. But that being said, they're doing that not only to build their record, but to build something called their winner effect, okay? And your winner effect just basically means that anytime you get a win, you get a little dopamine spike, and that means that your hormones change. You get more serotonin, more dopamine, and you feel more like a winner. And now the next fit challenge is going to become that much easier because you're coming from a winning place, right? And that's what the winner effect is. Now, if you build up to things, you don't go to the top, staircase right away. You build up to that. It's going to be way easier, and you're going to be able to get into a great place. Now, if you are in a place where you can't even get on the first stair, right? Then what you need to do is you need to mentally get yourself there. And you do that by using your imagination and impressing upon your subconscious mind that you are a winner, that you can do this, visualizing that success. So it gets into your nervous system, and then you start acting out of that. What's a lot more important than the words you say is where they come from. And where they come from is who you are being on a deeper level in that moment. And that's something I like to call your mental stance. And you can come from a mental stance of, insecurity, of confrontation avoidance, of holding back, of being shy, whatever. Or you can come from a mental stance of dominance, of power, of trying to serve and help someone, right? Which automatically removes a lot of anxiety, by the way. If you just think like, hey, I'm just on this call to help this person figure out the best decision. And if there is the best decision, then coach them through that, removes a lot of anxiety for you right away. But, of all of those mental stances. And what I like to say, guys, is I like to compare things to boxing because fighting is also like life. So if you go into a boxing ring, you can have a mental stance of, a lot of people do this. When you go and fight or spar someone, they have a mental stance of retrieval, of not getting hurt. They're not stepping in the ring to win. They're stepping in the ring not to lose. And often you see this in fighters where they took a big loss. Now they're fighting differently because of their mental stance that changed. And the reason I call it a mental stance is because I want to impress upon you how easy it is to change. Because all a mental stance is the same as a physical stance, but then mentally. So if I'm going into the boxing gym like this, or if I'm going into a sales conversation like this, it's not going to be the most workable. You're probably going to tell me, hey, stand like this, not overly, but just stand like this, and keep your guard right here, whatever. And you're just going to change that. And the more that you do it, the more it conditions, and now it becomes automatic. So that's the exact same idea with a mental stance. You consciously shift into a new mental stance that's more workable for the results that you want. And from there on, you repeat it, imaginative and in real life by essentially faking it till you make it. And then from there, you're going to be it, and it will go automatic. It'll become your new default stance. Okay. So that is essentially how to train more certainty in your system. And that's how you're going to be able to override the prospect's map of reality, even with something like price, right? If you're very certain that this is actually just something that's cheap, right? Then now they're going to buy into that as well. And that's actually going to be their reality. So your subconscious certainty and your expectation of reality will determine what they feel. Which leads me into my next point, which is your expectation of reality. And that's the law of expectation. So you got to understand, this ties highly into confidence and into the winner effect. But you want to really be aware of the fact that your expectations create reality. Okay? Whatever you expect before you enter a meeting, before you enter a sales call, whatever, is usually what's going to be the blueprint mentally of that prospect, right? Because our expectations are subcommunicated through micro behaviors. And I'll tell you a quick story about this. When I had my first sales job ever, we were going door to door and we were selling like charity and newspapers and that kind of stuff. And I had this guy there in the team who was having to do a presentation about his performance. Everybody did that, like one person per week did that. And, you know, this guy was absolutely crushing everybody on the team. And the thing about this guy was that he wasn't even that impressive. He was a very regular dude. How he spoke wasn't crazy. He wasn't a crazy confident dude. He just wasn't there wasn't nothing about him that we could really pin down, me or the other guys, that was like, okay, this is why he's better, right? We had the same script, same everything. And so I really thought about it. I asked this guy, because in this presentation he was going over basic shit. I was like, listen, motherfucker, what are you doing differently? Why are you closing so much more? I don't see you doing anything different. He couldn't tell me. After that, I really thought about it more and more. And what I realized is that this guy had a history of winning, and this guy just had an expectation that people should sign up for the charity thing. It was like a monthly donation, like a subscription thing, right? But for him, it was just a very normal sale, right? It was a normal sell. Like he had an expectation that this is a normal ask, is not a big deal, and is going to be fine, right? Just like if you would go and ask someone the time on the street, that's a normal ask. You're probably not going to have that much anxiety about it. But if you're going to ask someone $100, you're probably going to communicate very much differently, right? And so anyways, because he had this subconscious expectation, right? It was going into those conversations like this is normal, right? This is completely normal. This is cheap. This is a normal price or cheap, and you should buy this. Otherwise, you're kind of a dick, right? Because you're not supporting the fucking charity. So anyways, he was going door to door with that expectation. And obviously he wasn't closing everybody, but he was closing a hell of a lot of people, because within his micro expressions, with how he looked, with where he stood, with where he held the iPad, whatever, he communicated on a subcommunicative level that you should sign up, otherwise it's not normal. And that was within his reality. So that means the same thing, right? It's within your reality. Now, that's a big thing, right? I've been in coaching for a long time. I've closed 100K deals, right? In like 1 hour calls with prospects that were cold as they come, right? Just from a Facebook ad. And then it's just because that's within my reality. I know the value it's going to provide. I know it's going to work. And I know, and to me, I don't have a limit on that price, right? It's like within my reality. And you can apply this to anything, right? Even if you're trying to go out and meet people, this and that, however people treat you, or the special treatment that you get from certain people, if you know what I'm talking about, that is largely due to like what's within your reality, what is normal for you. And if that is normal for you, then usually that's going to now be normal for those other people if you have certainty, like we talked about before, within that reality. Okay, so from there on leads me to my next point, which is validation. Okay, and validation is a very important dynamic within humans, right? Within human interaction in general, because validation is that if you are the more valuable person within the interaction, if you're able to position yourself as an authority, as above that person, but not in a dick way, right? Just in a way where like you're above the person, you're trying to advise them, and you're a leader within that conversation by your subcommunication, because people judge your value not based on what's on paper or whatever, or sure, that can help, but it's largely based on your subcommunication, right? How people attribute value to a person is how they subcommunicate, which means, the tonality of their voice, it means their energy, right? Which is actually even a layer deeper than your subcommunication. It's how you speak. It's all of those things, how you look, and that subcommunication tells someone, right? if this person below me or above me. Now, if your subcommunication is on point and you're above another person, that means that they automatically want some sort of validation from you, even if it's not a lot. And that validation can actually push people to buying decisions because they want to look good in your eyes, right? Because they really respect you. And people want validation from people they respect. So where does this come from? Where does the right subcommunication to get that dynamic even come from? It comes from your self-perception. Okay, so you have to deem yourself as valuable. You have to deem yourself as high level. And you have to essentially create a mental stance by consciously choosing it, literally, just that. Don't make it more fucking complex than that. You literally just choose, I am the leader within those conversations. I am valuable. You choose to come from that mental stance. And at first, it's going to be like, once again, you choose that and then you forget about it after 2 minutes and you fuck it up, right? But then you do it again. Now you forget about it after 3 minutes. And now you literally train this new identity in yourself, okay? Because now you're operating from that place. And if you do that, you're going to find that you're going to be dealing with prospects and they're literally going to want to impress you, right? And this is stuff that nobody talks about. This is under the script, under the words, under the layers of the superficial sales techniques, because validation dynamics are extremely powerful, but people don't really mention them as much. So if you are a leader within that conversation, you're going to find, once again, that especially if you use identity labels and those kinds of things, people are going to want to really look like that person to you as well. They're not going to want to even tell you that they don't have the money or whatever, because they want to look good in your eyes, right? Or they want to take action because they want to look good in your eyes, those kinds of things. And it can actually be even one of the most powerful sales techniques if used correctly. And once again, where it comes from is you being the more valuable, more higher person within that interaction. And once again, that's not from a against each other perspective. You're from a collaborative frame, but you are the leader and they're following. You are essentially their older brother or the doctor advising them or whatever, okay? So if you hold that dynamic there, then you're gonna have all the power. And once again, something that applies to every single area in your life. Whenever you're meeting people, whenever you're meeting, in social situations, that validation dynamic is also at play. And one more thing I'll say about it is that one way that you can see this as well, last piece that I'll say that's a hidden layer in sales, is who is afraid of confrontation? Who is afraid of tension? Okay, this is the last magic sauce. If you are not afraid of confrontation, if you're not afraid of awkward moments, if you're not afraid of awkward silences, you're automatically going to have so much more power within that sales conversation and with any conversation in your fucking life. Because now the prospect is the only one who's scared for that. So they're going to fill the silences, right? They're going to try to not make it awkward. When there's a confrontation about, oh, you said this, but it's actually this, right? You actually fronted about something, or like, hey, you're not holding yourself to a high enough standard. You're willing and able to go there, and the prospect might not be, which gives you a lot more power to influence within that conversation. Now, how do you get to that point? It's one simple thing. Continuously stepping into discomfort creates comfort, and comfort is confidence. So if you want to get comfortable with tension, with awkwardness, with confrontation, even slight confrontation, you need to search for it, okay? So in your daily life, because obviously you're not just going to start searching for confrontation in sales calls, even though you are going to do that if necessary, but you can't just start, fucking grilling someone about their t-shirt. Anyway, what you can do is in real life, go and find confrontational situations. And what I mean is not like starting fighting people. I mean, if someone is playing music too loud in a public scenario, say, hey man, can you turn it down a little bit? Trying to focus over here. Something like that, right? And say it in that way. Say it in a downwards tonality way. Say it in a breaking rapport way, right? Or if you see something happening, break it up, or whatever. If someone gave you something at the restaurant that's wrong, say something about it. Try to get a refund, whatever. Get yourself into awkward confrontational situations, or at least don't try to avoid them, and you get comfortable with it, and you use that in your sales conversations, because that general confidence applies to this, and you're going to close a hell of a lot more deals. Listen, if you want my help to actually be able to get to this point where you're crushing it in sales and get placed guaranteed in the best industry and space that there is in 2025 right now, check the link out right here in the bio. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. And now we are done.